So we'll just move on.
Next witness?
My next witness is Leanne Singley.
All right.
Do you swear or affirm to testify truthfully in this case under penalty of law? Thank you.
Bear with me, Ms. Singley.
Yes.
Ma'am, can you please state your name, spelling your name for the court reporter?
Sure. My name is Leanne Singley. First name is Lee, capital ANN. Last name Singley, Singley.
And what is your particular professional discipline?
I'm a forensic scientist.
Okay, and what areas of forensic science do you specialize in?
So currently I work mostly in bloodstain pattern analysis.
Okay, and can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury about your background and your training in bloodstain pattern analysis?
Sure. I guess I'll start with my educational background. I have a bachelor's degree in biology and a minor in chemistry from the University of Pittsburgh. I also received a master's degree with a concentration in forensic science from the University of Florida. In 1987, I was hired as a forensic scientist in the Pennsylvania State Police Crime Laboratory. So I'm just entering now my 39th year in forensics. I spent about 17 years at the State Police Crime Lab and received some training regarding various areas of forensics, but in specific to bloodstain pattern analysis, I started my education in that in 1993. Afterwards, I've had basic and advanced training. I've had training in the math and physics of bloodstain pattern analysis, fluid dynamics of bloodstain pattern analysis, the interaction of blood on fabrics, so a fabrics training class, and other conferences and training opportunities that I've had throughout the years.
Now, ma'am, do you hold any titles on boards or anything like that relating to your professional associations?
So I'm a member, currently a member of the Organization of Scientific Area Committees, which is a federally convened committee that is assisting the bloodstain pattern community in setting down guidelines and standards of how the discipline should be performed. I've been part of that group for a number of years. Prior to that, there was a similar group that was convened federally called the Scientific Working Group on Bloodstain Pattern Analysis. That began in 2002, and I was a member from the inception of that committee up until that committee was replaced through the Organization of Scientific Area Committees, otherwise called the OSAC.
And groups like the OSAC and the previous organization, what's the intent of those?
So as I stated, the intent is to bring together subject matter experts to help to develop guidance documents, standard documents on how the discipline should be performed or the training requirements that are necessary, other features of it. And it's not the only forensic discipline that does this. DNA does this, fingerprints, documents examination. They all have committees that are addressing those issues.
And is this all designed to have uniformity in terms of how it's being practiced?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Are what you just described, is that designed to have uniformity of how bloodstream
Yes. I mean, it's the idea is that we would like all areas, all agencies or entities that perform this discipline to have a framework to which everybody will perform it the same way, or at least similarly, have the same standards that they would use to do what they do. Initially, Swigstein had a large international involvement, so it wasn't just the United States that was offering information into these, into this committee and into these documents. There was a large international component as well.
Okay, and Swigstein, the company that was the predecessor to OSAC, that stands for Scientific Work Group Stains.
Yeah, so it's Scientific Working Group on blood, it was on blood stain pattern analysis, but they shortened it to Swigstein.
Okay, and did you have any role in running that organization?
Well, I was, as I mentioned, I was a member from its inception. In 2002, I served as the Quality Assurance Committee Chair for a number of years within that group.
And ma'am, have you ever been qualified as an expert to testify in court regarding blood stain pattern analysis?
I have.
How many times?
So specifically to blood stain pattern analysis, I'm not sure. I've testified over 90 occasions on various areas of forensics. Greater than 10 of those are blood stain pattern, maybe more.
And have you ever been qualified in Commonwealth of Virginia?
I have not.
Okay, have you ever done work within the Commonwealth of Virginia with police organizations?
Yes, I've conducted training for the Virginia State Police on a number of occasions in blood stain pattern analysis.
Okay. Your Honor, I'd move Ms. Singley in as an expert in blood stain pattern analysis.
Any objection?
No objection.
All right, so moved.
Ms. Singley, you had an opportunity to see Ms. Groff's presentation yesterday, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you actually know her, correct?
I do.
Through your various affiliations.
Yes, sir.
And were you able to, in arriving at, well, let me show you a few things and see where we go from there. Your Honor, can we show that to the witness?
Yeah, it is shown to the witness.
Okay.
If you can make it a little bigger, it might help her.
Yeah. Not that.
If you double click on the file name right there you have. There we go. No, you're having the same problem.
Judge, this is the court's PowerPoint that's coming up. I don't know. Well, ma'am, did you have an occasion to review items in this case?
I did.
And items of evidence relating to this case?
Yeah, so I received photographs, so I didn't actually have the physical evidence, but I did review photographs and videos and things of that nature that would expose me to what was evidence, turned out to be evidence in this case.
Okay. Your Honor, I think I'm going to have to switch the computer just because of that PowerPoint thing that pops up. Can I have a 5-minute recess?
No.
Ma'am, are you able to see a picture on your screen?
I can.
Did you have an opportunity to review this item as part of the evidence that you reviewed?
I'm sorry.
Judge, have we identified the photograph?
No, I think it's defense 80, at least that's what it was marked yesterday.
83, I believe, Judge, is that?
80.
80?
Yes.
Okay. Ma'am, I'm going to have you look at what has been marked as Defense Exhibit 80. Have you seen that?
I've seen photographs of this item before, yes.
Okay, and what is it that you notice when you look at this item right here?
It's a knife. It looks like to be stainless steel, like a chef's style knife, and there appears to be transfer bloodstains or some irregular shaped bloodstains along the knife and the blade.
Now, in talking about bloodstains, is there a uniform terminology, or were there attempts to have uniform terminology as to what bloodstains are and varying other descriptive terms?
You mean the actual terms we use when we're writing
Yes.
reports? Yes, the organization that I mentioned to you earlier has set down standard terminology that we would use in the course of writing reports or training, or even just discussing bloodstain pattern analysis. And so that has been published.
And, or is that how you find, do you find that the terminology is uniform amongst bloodstain pattern analysis?
I mean, the goal, that is the goal, that it would cause uniformity, and it has definitely helped since that terminology has been utilized or has been written and published. To say that everyone is using it correctly or abiding by that terminology, I can't say that for sure, but I can definitely say that it has, the ends have sort of, the end result has been what we had hoped it would be, and that is to cause the uniformity of that terminology across the discipline.
Now, did you have an occasion to also analyze or look at other aspects of evidence, like the forensic science reports and things like that?
Yes, when I do a bloodstain pattern analysis, the discipline itself is the study of the size, the shape, the distribution, location, appearance of bloodstains. But in the course of the bloodstain pattern analysis, we also have to include or consider what we call task-relevant information. So information that is relevant to the bloodstain pattern analysis, not necessarily extraneous information, but those things would be like the autopsy report or medical reports if the individual wasn't deceased, or the DNA reports or other forensic laboratory reports that will help to actually include or exclude classifications and ultimate interpretations at the end.
Now, ma'am, if you look at the picture, there's a specific circle relating to an area of that knife that you've just identified.
Just for the record, you had marked that as 80A yesterday,
80,
the one with the circle.
80A, yes, thank you.
That's what you
Identified as Defense Exhibit 80A. Do you see that?
I do.
And do you recall any analysis that you reviewed relating to that particular area of this knife?
Yeah, this is the area of the knife that is at the base of the blade where the handle meets up, and it is one of the areas that was sampled for DNA analysis.
Okay, and did you observe any findings relating to that?
Yes, this area of the knife had DNA. The DNA of Christine Banfield and Joseph Ryan could not be eliminated from that sample.
And were there any others that were excluded from that sample?
I believe Brendan Banfield and Juliana were eliminated.
Okay. And is that what you're referring to? The next page?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and that's,
Your Honor, I would object. This is not
Well, I mean, he hasn't entered anything into evidence yet, but,
understood.
and I don't know what this would be marked as. Okay,
ADB
you already have,
or 80,
you have ADB, ADC, ADD, 82, 83.
I'll go 80E.
he hasn't entered into evidence yet, he's just showing the witness.
And what do you see this is, ma'am?
It's the results of the bloodstain, the DNA report that addressed this area of the knife.
Okay, and that's a report that you reviewed in your analysis?
I did,
And this is a portion to highlight that particular statement?
yes.
Okay. And ma'am, is this also from the report?
Are you going to mark this something?
80F? Did you have a chance to review that?
Yes,
Okay, and is this also a report that you reviewed, a portion of it?
yes.
Okay, and what does that tell you?
Again, it's indicating that Christine Banfield,
Your Honor, I would object to the witness reading from a report that has not been admitted into evidence and is not the complete
Okay, I'll
report.
sustain that
That's
objection.
fine, that's fine, Judge. And ma'am, did you have occasion to review the Office of the Medical Examiner's report relating to Joe Ryan?
I did.
Okay, and what, if anything, did you observe in your analysis relating to the pictures from the Office of the Medical Examiner?
Well, I looked at the photographs of Joe Ryan at the autopsy examination, and in part of that, I was able to review the injuries that he sustained.
Okay, now, the topic of self-wounding came up with Ms. Graff yesterday. Is self-wounding something that is often found in knife injuries?
Your Honor, objection is to leading.
Well, I'll sustain as leading if you want to rephrase.
Okay. What, if anything, do you find as an expert in knife-related wounds?
So in knife-related activities, investigations that involve sharp instruments, so knifings, things like of those nature, we often see the assailant, it's not uncommon for the assailant to self-wound during those. In fact, when I'm training individuals, it's one of the things I train law enforcement investigators to ensure that they look to areas of the crime scene that may be further away from the victim's bodies to find an isolated blood drop or things like that. So we know this to happen, and it can happen in various mechanisms during the activity that's going on in terms of the criminal investigation. But it's not an uncommon occurrence.
Okay, were you able to note where the injuries were in your examination for Joe Ryan?
It was on his left thumb, I believe.
Anything, did you observe anything else?
I think it was a puncture. It was listed as a puncture wound.
Okay. Now, is that the puncture wound that you're talking about? Do you
I'm
see
sorry,
it?
I can put it back on.
Sorry.
What, this,
This would be 80F.
there was 80B yesterday.
80B.
Okay.
So this photo here that you have now.
Yes, this is 80B.
The wound was listed as a central cut puncture of the palmar aspect of the left thumb, and that is what's being depicted here.
Okay. And if ADF, Judge, would that be the next in line?
You have one marked AEC, which I had put down as finger of Joseph Ryan, and I'm not sure if that's the same picture that you used yesterday when you're showing the other expert.
I'm not certain either, Judge. What's the next one, ADD?
Well, we'll do ADC. I mean, we can make this ADC, that's
ADC,
fine. You haven't
yes.
entered it in evidence yet, so ADC.
And ma'am, is this a picture that you've observed in your analysis of the documentation relating to this case?
Yes, these are part of the autopsy
And
photographs.
is that the same injury that you've previously discussed and identified?
It's on the left, yes, it's in the same location.
And what is that picture of, ma'am?
It's another photo of a different orientation of the thumb.
Okay, so the same injury,
What do
It
you want
appears to be, yes.
What do you want to mark that as?
ADD,
You have a D, you have an E, and you have an F.
ADG,
Okay.
Now, ma'am, in your review of the body, so let's just go through, what did you review, or did your review include body-worn camera?
It did.
Okay. Were you able to review body-worn camera to determine if there were any injuries to Brendan Banfield's hands?
Yes.
Okay. What, if anything, did you find?
Well, I reviewed the video, the body cam video that took him into the ambulance, and they specifically looked at his hands for injuries, and I guess it was an EMT, whoever was in the ambulance with him, had indicated there were no injuries.
Okay. Now, ma'am, if you could take a look at the screen. This is the full Office of the Chief Medical Examiner report. Have you had an opportunity to review
There's
that?
nothing on the screen. There's nothing on the screen.
Towards indulgence. Court's indulgence still.
Okay.
All right, can I have, get somebody sits in. Is it? Is that showing up on your screen?
It was when he was there.
Yeah, I know. I think I've touched the wrong thing. Okay. Ma'am, can you see, can you see the picture on the screen?
I can.
Okay. And do you recognize that?
This is the DNA report.
Okay. And I'm going to scroll down. Is this the area down here where the cursor is that you previously reviewed?
Yes,
Okay. And that informed your conclusions as to the blood stain near the handle and the handle juncture?
Yes.
And ma'am, can you see this on your screen?
I can.
Okay, and you've reviewed this. This is the report of June 9th, 2023 of the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner?
Yes.
And I'm just going to scroll down. Ma'am, looking at where the cursor is on the screen, is that what informed you as to the exhibit previously?
Yes, this is an area that describes additional injuries.
Okay. Now, did you have an opportunity to review a report from DLI, a private laboratory?
I did.
Okay, and in that report, can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what was the sample that they were providing?
So in the DLI report, there was a sample that that was collected by them on the area of Joe Ryan's jeans. That was the waistband, I think interior and exterior waistband zipper, and I believe the button area. But the significance of their sampling was that in their report, they stated that the sample was taken avoiding staining, meaning that they were not trying to collect staining, they were trying to avoid stained areas of that part of the jeans.
Okay, and what would you say about avoiding the staining and still having a laboratory analysis? What are they looking for?
Typically, they're looking for a DNA source that's not coming from staining. So touch DNA, or sometimes they'll do it just to determine who the wearer is of an item of clothing, or sometimes they'll do it just to see if somebody touched that area, that they're curious if they can find the DNA from that individual.
Okay, and do you recall the results of that report?
I believe the results of that area, that included DNA sources from Christine Banfield and Joseph Ryan, but Brendan and I believe Juliana were both eliminated.
Okay, so let me kind of shift gears here about blood stain pattern analysis and what you do when you first start out doing it in a case.
You mean my general methodology of how I
Yes.
do an approach? So when I get a case now, and currently I get a case, I want to know as little information about the case as possible. So I try to limit whoever is requesting it from me to just the information that I need to know in terms of the blood stain. So typically that might be like how many individuals were injured, or if there was more than one deceased, more than one bleeder, what their injuries might have been, things of that nature. And then I will get whatever materials are provided to me, I start looking through the photographs, determining what I can say or maybe not say about certain pattern types. We call that the characterization. We characterize them, as I mentioned, through the size, the shape, the distribution, location of the stains. We look to see how they might correlate with each other. And then we begin or attempt to list a classification or classify them in what might have caused them. So earlier I talked about those characteristics, and I think it's important to understand that bloodstain pattern analysis is answering a very different question than DNA analysis. DNA is answering the who, the BPA, the bloodstain pattern analysis attempts to answer the how. So how the bloodstains got to a location. So once I've done that initial preliminary classifications or some idea of what I believe this might be coming from, I'll then incorporate in things like the autopsy report, DNA analysis, that will help us to refine that classification, maybe eliminate some things that I might have kept in the running in terms of a classification. Then at the end, we discuss what those classifications mean in terms of the DNA and what we might be able to interpret in terms of individual events or things that happened at a particular crime scene.
Now, can you see the picture that's on the screen there?
I can.
Okay. Your Honor, I would identify that as Defense Exhibit 84.
I believe it's already the Commonwealth's Exhibit 173, is that
So
correct?
Judge, the original picture was admitted as Commonwealth's 173.
Okay.
His manipulation of the picture to show the cropping side by side with the original is not.
Okay, so,
specifically neither of those.
all right, so what number did you want
I
to
think
make?
84 was the next one.
Yes, okay.
Ma'am, can you describe what you're seeing there on the screen?
Yes, this is the left forearm of Joseph Ryan and bloodstains that were on that left forearm.
Okay. And did you create this side-by-side comparison?
I did.
And what was the intention of that? What were you trying to show?
Just it gives an overall of the arm. You kind of see it in that perspective, and then just I put a square around the area that I cropped so that you could kind of see it how it related to the arm in total.
Okay. Your Honor, can I move that in as Defense Exhibit 84 and publish it to the jury?
Any objection?
No objection.
All right, 84 in evidence.
Can you describe what you're looking at for the ladies and gentlemen of the jury and what it is that you do in analyzing something like this?
So first, let's start with what I do when I'm analyzing something like this. Again, I know I'm sounding repetitive, but I look at things like the size, the shape, the distribution, location, and certainly take into consideration the target surface. We know that that has a profound effect on what we see, so we have to think about that when we're looking at things like size and shape, because it can change depending on what the target surface is. This target surface was a bit unique in the sense that it was a forearm that had quite a bit of hair on it, so it provided a different surface than, say, a flat table or even carpet. It tended to have an influence on what we were seeing.
Now, what is it that you can say about this stain pattern?
So
based upon
I just
your-
described what I saw here, which was a linear series, so a series of some irregularly shaped drops or stains that were located on this arm. I did not use the word drop. I used a series of irregularly shaped smaller stains, because if you look at it closely, the stains themselves are almost three-dimensional in shape, because they in areas were clinging to the hair on the arm. So it distorted what we can see in terms of its true shape and true, like even the size of it. It was, well, there's no measurement in here, so we really don't have a true size.
Okay, and so in determining what exactly this stain is, you would want measurement?
Well-
and you would check out what the surface is?
Yeah, I mean, we don't always have measurements. Sometimes they're not there, and we can use things in the area that can sort of inform what our size might be. But I don't have a true size. I did call them smaller because they appeared smaller compared to things around it in the area. But yeah, I mean, certainly the more information you have, the more data we can use to then make a classification.
Based on the information that you had relating to these stains, is it possible to make a classification?
I did not make a classification, and this target surface did not lend to classifying these stains to a specific mechanism.
Now, let's switch gears a little bit. In terms of how blood falls on things, can you opine as to what kind of pattern would be created if someone put blood onto a surface?
Put blood on how? How are you, I mean, touching a surface? If it
Or holding blood and dropping it?
If an individual had, say, blood in their hands that had enough volume for it to release, like if it were to just drop to the ground, we would call that a splash pattern. So it would be a large volume of blood that is falling due to gravity. It's not, you'd have to be careful to not include their hands swinging, because if their hands swing in that process, now you have cast off, which is blood being released from an object in motion. If it's just merely falling onto the surface, then you would get a splash pattern, and that usually will then have sort of a parent area of where the volume of the blood is, and then because that parent area was created with blood sort of collapsing into itself, it'll create satellite spatters around that area.
Okay, and have you worked with those kinds of patterns?
Yes, I mean, I make up mock crime scenes for my training, so I've created them myself by doing that.
Now, is it plausible for someone to scoop up blood and carry it to a deposit somewhere?
I'm sorry.
Objection, leading.
All right, I'll sustain as to leading.
What, if anything, well, first of all, let's just talk about how would one scoop blood?
I don't know how you would do that.
Okay.
You mean scoop it up from something, like, I mean, it's a fluid, I think it would be difficult. It's not like you can, like you have a dustpan that you could, you know what I mean? When I think of scooping in that nature, I just think in terms of if I had spilled something on my floor in the kitchen, I wouldn't be able to pick it up with my hands, if that's what you're asking me.
Okay. Does the surface that the blood is on, I mean, you're saying you don't know how it can be scooped,
Well-
but does the surface matter?
Yes, I mean, yeah, I mean, if you have the blood on something that's porous and absorbent, then there would be less blood that you'd be able to even scoop, if you will. If you know what I mean, there would be less blood. You wouldn't be able to access it because it would be soaking in to an absorbent surface.
Okay. Have you ever experienced in blood stain pattern analysis someone scooping blood and pouring it in another place?
No.
What would be the difficulties of that if that were to have happened?
Well, I think getting it into your hands to begin with would be a challenge, and then transferring it.
Your Honor, I would object at this time. Calls for speculation. She's just testified that she's not had any experience with any scooping of blood, so I'm
Okay.
not.
Speculation.
I think her expertise in blood spatter analysis gives her an opportunity to opine as to how it could be done if it was.
I'll sustain that, for that question, I'll sustain the objection if you want to rephrase.
Blood as a fluid, is it is it possible to pick it up?
Pick it up on, yeah, I mean, I think I think the difficulty here is, of course, you can touch blood and it picks up onto your fingers, right? Like if you, as a transfer stain. I think the fact that it's a fluid, the challenge is that if you're trying to collect and keep it in the confines of your hand, the first part is getting it into your hands, and the second part is not having it seep back through your fingers, out of your hands. Does that make sense? So like, the only thing I can use to describe it is when I'm making a mock crime scene, sometimes we'll put blood in our hands and make like an impact pattern from it. And just putting small amounts in the hand, it's difficult to contain it in the hand, even in doing that, right? So that's about the closest I can get to having an experience of what it's like to actually, and that's when we pour it into our hand from, a cup. I know this sounds a little, we do this because we use real blood when we do training. So I know what it's like to have blood in the hand, and trying to work with it in that way. It's a challenge.
Okay, so just to follow through with your example, what is it that you're trying to show when you would do these trainings?
So all I'm doing is, or me or my trainer will put it in there, because we're going to ultimately smack it to create an impact pattern. And by putting it in your hand, you're able to place your hand in a mock crime scene to kind of mimic where somebody might have been beaten or something like that. So we're using it as a training tool for that purpose. It was just an example of the challenge of keeping it contained within the palm of your hand.
Okay. Now, going back to your review of the evidence in this case for purposes of blood stain pattern analysis, did you see anything that indicated that Joe Ryan not being involved in the stabbing?
Objection, leading.
Leading?
Yes, I'm sorry, objection, leading.
All right, I'll sustain as to leading.
Okay. What indications, what if anything, do you look at to determine if someone's involved or not involved in an incident dealing with stabbing?
I think maybe I would like to answer it in the methodology of how I look at a bloodstain case. Once I've evaluated, in this case, to look at it and think of it in terms of statements that were made, or in that we had information from the body cams that I had when I was looking at that. So when I do that, I can kind of evaluate the evidence to see if there's anything that sort of doesn't seem to align with one way or another, or some things that, not necessarily that do, but more looking for the things that might raise, quote, the red flag, like kind of go, oh, this doesn't seem to align with that. Maybe I need to do some more exploration or find out more information about that. So that's what I did in this case.
Okay, and did you, and it sounds to me like you're looking for things that rule someone out and things that stay with the possibility of being one of the people there.
Yes.
Okay. In your pattern analysis, bloodstain pattern analysis, did you find anything that would exclude Joseph Ryan as being involved in the stabbing?
Objection calls for a final conclusion, goes to
If you
the,
want to approach.
Ma'am, you had an opportunity to listen to Ms. Graff yesterday, correct?
Yes.
Now, in terms of your discipline of bloodstain pattern analysis, is it your experience that everything can be labeled based upon an analysis?
judge, objection is to leading.
What, if anything,
I'll sustain the objection, go
yeah,
ahead.
what, if anything, is your experience as to labeling every aspect of spots, even if they're not tested?
I'm not sure what you mean by labeling. You mean classifying them? Like,
Classifying, sorry. That's,
I'm sorry, state again. So what is my experience regarding whether you can classify everything
Yes.
in a crime scene? Oh, no, many times we can't classify certain stain patterns because of some of the things I already mentioned. It could be the target surface, the amount of stains that we have, the other data that we just, that are just, isn't just available for us to form that classification. So that's not uncommon. And we can't really classify every single blood stain. We don't attempt to in many cases. We could be doing it a long time if we tried to identify or even address every blood stain that's at a crime scene.
okay. And in listening to her testimony yesterday, did you have any agreement or disagreement with what she said about certain blood stains?
There were certain blood stains that I did not provide a classification for that she did.
Okay. And are there any in particular that you're speaking of?
Well, the forearm stains was one area. The 4 irregularly shaped stains that are on the forearm, she provided a classification for as being drip stains, and I did not.
Okay. And why did you not provide a classification?
Again, as I stated, the target surface here really distorted or what we were able to see to get that sort of well-formed circular stain that you would be looking for to be able to say that it's a drip stain from the exclusion of all other mechanisms. Because once you've classified it as a certain mechanism, you've excluded everything else. I didn't feel there was enough information here for me to do that. And this target surface, it would be inappropriate, I believe, to do that because the target surface was not ideal for being able to do that.
Now, if you didn't have enough information, would it be possible after the fact, which is what was?
Objection is to leading.
All right, I'll sustain the leading. Is this a good time to take our lunch break?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, all right, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and take our lunch break for an hour. Please do not discuss the testimony with discuss the case with anybody, and don't do any outside research, okay? Thank you.
Apparently.
All right. And ma'am, since you're testifying, you can't discuss your testimony with anybody this time to include the defense team, okay?
Okay.
All right, that's fine. So we'll come back at 2:05. You're going to make sure all your technology is ready for the afternoon. To include your exhibit numbers, please.
I was actually going to just talk to your clerk and make sure that I had all of the,
All right, to make sure
This
you
meal.
get it straight. And
Yes.
you don't have to be a hero. I do take paper documents if necessary, you know that, right?
Judge, I just can't do that. I'm a technology guy now.
So you say, okay, 2:05, okay?
Thank you.
All right.
All right, your next question.
Thank you. Ms. Singley, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
You listened to Ms. Groff's testimony yesterday, correct?
Yes.
Did you hear her discussion of the position of Joe Ryan and the blood, whatever she called it, on Joe Ryan? Do you remember that discussion?
Yeah, you mean specific to his arm? Or is that what you're referring
Specific
to?
to his position on the ground.
Yes, I did hear her talk
Okay.
about that.
Did you agree with that?
That the blood stains would indicate that he was lying on the ground?
Yes.
No.
And what can you point to in your expertise that would have you arrive at that conclusion?
Well, so I guess starting with, I believe that she mentioned that the stains that were the 4 linear stains that I did not classify, she classified them. So that's where the first divergence was. So, and then that classification is what led her to say that he would have been in a position lying on the ground when they were deposited, if I recall correctly. So the first part is that as I mentioned before lunch, the target surface didn't lend to classification to start with, and to go on to then determine what that classification would mean in terms of his positioning is the part where it starts by the fact that I didn't believe that a classification could be made. Then to go on further to say what that classification would mean would be why I would disagree.
Okay. And was there evidence that you observed that would have support different conclusions than that, other than not being able to classify?
So maybe the best way to describe this is to have you understand what a drip stain is in terms of blood stain pattern analysis. A drip stain is a stain that is formed by gravity alone. So it's not just a circular stain you see on a surface. It's a circular stain that arrived by a passive, formed by gravity. So it's not something that happened that's circular from another mechanism, but it just happened to hit the ground at perpendicular, making it circular. It is formed only through gravity alone. So the fact that I didn't classify it as anything was the first part. But then on top of that, if you have just the fact that something is circular does not make it a drip stain. It's one of the features you can look at, but it doesn't mean that it's a drip stain. So there are other mechanisms that when the blood is going through the air, say from an impact, say somebody was being beaten with a hammer. When the blood goes through the air, it goes in a parabolic arc, and if it doesn't hit anything in that trajectory, it will eventually fall to the ground, and when it hits the ground, it's going to look circular. But if it hits the wall on the vertical surface, it's going to look circular there too, because anywhere it hits a perpendicular, it will look circular. But we look at the size of them to kind of help to inform whether it could just be a drip stain, something that just was because somebody was standing over something and dripping blood, or if it was because of another mechanism. So because we didn't have a lot of these features, there was no classification done, because the size helps to inform that, and then the shape itself and the fact that we had this target surface to eliminate any of those other mechanisms, to only say that these are coming from drip stains and coming from above was part of the problem. Going further, if they were drip stains, it doesn't mean that because his arm was this way that he was down on the ground. It just means that the arm was in a position horizontal to where the passive drop was coming. Because people move around, your arm can be in, your body can be in different positions when you do that. So the orientation of your body and where that is in relation to where the blood is coming from is going to be how it will look like on that surface. But it's hard to then say, oh, the person was in this position just because there's something circular here that I think is a drip stain, and therefore because it's coming from above, he has to be on the ground laying down.
And if you were, as you've indicated in your previous testimony, that you would need more information, what more would you need other than what you just said in order to even make the determination?
Judge, objection calls for speculation.
You mean what? I'm sorry.
Objection calls for speculation.
I'm just asking her what other tools.
Overruled, that's fine.
Yeah, I think, I mentioned earlier, same answers as I would be looking at the size, shape, distribution, location, appearance. Those are the features that I look for, and determine that this is a drip stain to the exclusion of all other mechanisms. I would want to look for something that would look perfectly circular, that I could see scalloping all around the edges or spining around the edges, or it's perfectly circular on, like, say, a smooth surface, and that it has some size to it that would indicate that it's coming from just gravity forming it. If it's tiny, then, and I see it in terms of other, maybe in terms of other spatter stains in that area, I'm going to presume it's coming from or classify it as something coming from a mechanism that's a spatter-producing mechanism as opposed to just a single passive drop. So sometimes we can't tell. I mean, you know, we just have to look for those features and hope that if the target surface allows for it, we can classify it.
And in the absence of concrete information, is it appropriate to default toward a
Objection,
classification?
leading.
Sustained as to leading?
In the absence of additional information you want, how does one resolve that?
You go back to the higher classification. So if we start at blood stain, and then we might go to a spatter-producing mechanism of some sort, and then we can classify that either to cast off or impact or expirated blood. If we don't have the features to meet those on each level of that, we revert back to the level that's higher. And so in this case, I just said, these are blood stains, and I described them. They were irregularly shaped, somewhat three-dimensional on the arm.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions.
All right, cross-examination.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Hi.
So to stay with where we just left off.
Okay.
You're keeping it at the classification level that's up here because you don't have enough information to go a next step. Is that correct?
Yes.
But that doesn't inherently mean that that next step isn't a possibility, right?
Well, I don't consider the possibilities because if I can't go beyond the classification, then I didn't go beyond the classification. There's a reason I stopped.
Sure.
So I wouldn't.
But because you stopped, that then leaves all of the options still available. None have been excluded, correct?
You mean every possible mechanism that could possibly produce a blood stain?
Yes.
Yes, I guess, yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
including drops from above.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Going back for just a moment, you testified regarding the DLI lab, and you stated that the test sample was the pull from the genes avoiding staining. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, say that again. I
You
didn't hear that.
testified about the DLI DNA lab, specifically that the sample was a swab or a portion of Joseph Ryan's genes avoiding staining. Is that correct?
Avoiding staining, yes, I'm
Okay,
sorry.
but did you also read in the report that that sample was positive for blood?
Yeah, so it didn't say it was positive for blood. It said that blood was indicated in the sample. And so what that means is that they did a presumptive test. So that's a test that,
Right, we heard about that from our DNA experts. but-
so we didn't, the blood wasn't identified in that sample. It was an indication that there was blood there. And I think to clarify that the testing that is used in that instance is a very sensitive test that can pick up blood that you
Judge, I'm
can't
going to
see.
object. I don't think she's presented any foundation for knowledge of how the testing was conducted, and that wasn't my question.
All right, we're going to ask your question again. Let's go
Okay.
that way.
The laboratory result said that blood was indicated, yes or no?
That's not what you asked me, though. You said it was found. The test only said that blood was indicated,
Okay,
and yes.
thank you. That's all I have, Judge.
Okay, any redirect? Is this witness subject to recall?
Yes.
All right, so since you're subject to recall, just don't discuss your testimony.